The morning began like any other on Today with Jenna Friends, a program known for its lively blend of celebrity interviews, light-hearted segments, and a warm, inviting atmosphere that typically kept viewers entertained with minimal controversy. On this particular morning, however, the producers had lined up a guest who always carried a magnetic presence whenever she stepped in front of camera. Teyana Taylor, the multi-talented singer, actress, choreographer, and creative force. She arrived at the studio stylishly dressed, flashing her trademark confidence, and prepared to discuss her latest projects, including film appearances and fashion endeavors. Yet, beneath the surface of her composed demeanor, tension was quietly brewing, and few in the studio realized how quickly the seemingly ordinary segment would spiral into one of the most talked-about morning show clashes in recent memory, setting social media on fire within minutes. The introduction began smoothly enough, with Jenna Hager greeting viewers warmly and hyping up Teyana's impressive R8 copyright subtitled the copyright. The audience applauded as Teyana walked on set, exchanging smiles and hugs with the hosts. For a while, everything appeared to flow naturally. Questions about her fashion collaborations brought out her charismatic wit, and her playful anecdotes about motherhood earned laughter from the crowd. The conversation took a sharper turn, however, when Jenna, perhaps trying to push for a headline-grabbing moment, brought up rumors surrounding Teyana's recent career decisions and her sometimes public frustrations with the entertainment industry. Teyana, known for her unfiltered honesty, did not shy away. She leaned forward in her chair, her body language firm, and responded candidly, beginning to outline her grievances with how women of color in the industry often face double standards. At first, the tension was subtle, a shift in tone that attentive viewers might have sensed as Teyana's answers grew more passionate. Jenna attempted to redirect with a lighter comment, but her co-hosts interjected, pressing further about whether Teyana had walked away from certain opportunities out of choice or frustration. That was the spark. Teyana's voice sharpened as she explained that she had spent years being underappreciated, underestimated, and overlooked despite pouring creativity into her work. The audience grew quiet, sensing the atmosphere shift from playful to confrontational. A hush settled as she described how her hard work often went unnoticed, while others with less originality seemed to glide effortlessly into recognition. Her words carried conviction, and though some nodded in support, the host panel seemed increasingly uneasy, unsure of how to handle the raw honesty spilling onto the stage. When Jenna tried to pivot by suggesting that some of the criticism Teyana had expressed in the past might have been perceived as harsh, the energy in the room shifted dramatically. Teyana's eyes narrowed, and she responded with controlled frustration, explaining that speaking the truth often gets mislabeled as bitterness or aggression, especially when voiced by black women. She gestured emphatically, her hands cutting through the air as she spoke. The tension between host and guest was now impossible to ignore. Viewers watching at home could practically feel the electricity through their screens, while audience members in the studio looked on, their expressions ranging from wide-eyed astonishment to awkward discomfort. Teyana's tone remained steady but firm, refusing to soften her truth for the sake of morning show politeness. What had begun as a typical promotional interview was rapidly transforming into a cultural flashpoint live on television. The tension built further when one of the co-hosts chimed in with a comment suggesting that Teyana's success was undeniable and perhaps her frustrations were more about perception than reality. That remark struck a nerve. Teyana leaned back, crossed her arms, and in a measured tone explained that while she did enjoy recognition, her fight was never about personal validation but about fairness. She reminded everyone that she had been working in the industry since her teenage years, pouring effort into music, choreography, and acting, only to feel like she constantly had to fight twice as hard to receive half the acknowledgement. Her voice quivered with emotion but remained unwavering. The audience could sense that this was not a publicity stunt or rehearsed controversy. This was a woman unloading years of pent-up frustration in real time, and afraid of how uncomfortable it might make others. Jenna, attempting to diffuse the growing storm, suggested they pivot to the positive by talking about Teyana's recent acting roles. But the transition felt forced and dismissive, as though she was brushing aside everything Teyana had just passionately laid out. Teyana immediately noticed this shift and raised her eyebrows, asking bluntly why her truth was being treated like negativity rather than a legitimate issue worth discussing. The air grew heavier with every passing second. The camera caught Jenna fumbling for words, while her co-hosts exchanged nervous glances. A murmur of awkward laughter rose from the audience, but Teyana wasn't smiling. She sat upright, commanding the space, making it clear that she would not allow her words to be swept under the rug. The tension had reached a point where there was no turning back, only escalation. At this point, social media was already buzzing. Clips of the live segment were being clipped, captioned, and circulated by viewers at home who sensed they were witnessing a viral moment unfold. Twitter lit up with comments like "Teyana is not playing today and this is why morning shows need to stop poking at guests." Meanwhile, on set, Jenna attempted to regain composure, trying to position herself as empathetic. She said she understood where Teyana was coming from but hinted that perhaps Teyana could have chosen different platforms to air her grievances. That was the tipping point. Teyana tilted her head, gave a long pause, and then delivered a response that felt like both a dagger and a declaration of independence. "I don't wait for permission to speak my truth. My platform is wherever I'm standing." The crowd erupted in a mix of applause and gasps. The clash had now moved beyond a disagreement into a battle of principles, and everyone could see it. Teyana's refusal to sugarcoat her stance clashed directly with the morning show's brand of safe, upbeat conversation. The co-hosts scrambled to find a middle ground, offering platitudes about empowerment and resilience, but it only highlighted the disconnect between Teyana's raw honesty and the polished, curated tone of the show. The more they tried to smooth things over, the more visibly irritated Teyana became. She placed her hands on the arms of her chair, as though contemplating whether to stay or leave. Her eyes darted across the stage, scanning the panel, then the audience, then back at the camera, almost daring anyone to silence her. Every second carried a weight of unpredictability, and even the producers backstage reportedly panicked about whether to cut to commercial. Finally, the breaking point came when one host remarked that celebrities often forget how privileged they are compared to everyday people. The words hung heavy in the air, and Teyana's expression instantly hardened. With deliberate calmness, she explained that acknowledging privilege does not erase systemic challenges, nor does it mean her experiences of being undervalued should be invalidated. She stressed that using her voice was not about complaining but about opening doors for the next generation. Her explanation was powerful, but the dismissive tone of the comment had clearly crossed the line. Without raising her voice, Teyana made it clear she would no longer continue a conversation where her perspective was belittled. She pushed back her chair, stood up, and adjusted her jacket. The audience collectively held its breath as she declared that if honesty couldn't be respected, then there was no reason for her to remain seated. The studio erupted in chaos. Jenna tried to plead with Teyana to sit back down, insisting that they still wanted to hear more about her projects, but the damage was already done. Teyana, visibly agitated but composed, shook her head firmly. She thanked the audience for their support, then looked directly into the camera and said she hoped her fans and viewers understood why she had to walk away. She emphasized once more that silencing truth-tellers for the sake of comfort was exactly the problem in the industry. Her words resonated like an echo, sharp and undeniable. With that, she turned on her heel and walked off stage. The live audience gasped, some applauding in solidarity while others whispered in disbelief. The co-hosts sat frozen, caught between shock and damage control. The cameras struggled to capture the moment smoothly as producers scrambled to cut to commercial. As soon as the show went to break, behind-the-scenes staff rushed to the green room, trying to convince Teyana to return for a calmer segment later in the program. But she stood her ground, insisting that she had said all she needed to say and would not return to a space where her truth was undermined. Staffers were left scrambling, debating whether to apologize on air or to downplay the walk-off as a scheduled change. Meanwhile, Jenna and her co-hosts huddled together, visibly rattled. They whispered hurriedly as producers fed them instructions through earpieces. By the time cameras went live again, Jenna put on her brightest smile, though it was noticeably strained. She addressed the audience by saying that emotions sometimes run high in important conversations, and while they respected all perspectives, they were moving on. Yet viewers could tell that the unresolved tension lingered like smoke after a fire. The fallout was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes of the incident airing, hashtags like #Teyana Taylor and #TodayShowClash trended nationwide. Fans flooded social media platforms with messages of support, praising Teyana for standing firm and calling out what they saw as dismissive behavior from the hosts. Memes surfaced almost instantly, showing Teyana walking off with captions about refusing to tolerate disrespect. On the other side, critics accused her of being overly sensitive or dramatic, arguing that morning shows were not the place for such confrontations. The debate spilled across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and even mainstream news outlets, each adding fuel to the fire. By midday, clips of the walk-off had millions of views, turning what was supposed to be a standard promotional appearance into a defining viral moment of the week. Meanwhile, Teyana herself took to Instagram Live later that afternoon, offering her side of the story in detail. Speaking directly to her fans, she explained that her decision to walk off was not impulsive but deliberate. She said she had agreed to appear on the show in good faith, expecting to discuss her artistry and new projects. Instead, she felt ambushed with questions that minimized her experiences and painted her honesty as negativity. She reiterated that her choice to stand up and leave was an act of self-respect, not disrespect toward the show. Her authenticity struck a chord with viewers who admired her unwillingness to compromise her dignity for airtime. Thousands of comments poured in, filled with supportive messages and declarations that her bold move was inspirational. Back at the Today Show, producers held emergency meetings to determine how to handle the growing media frenzy. Some argued that issuing a formal apology would calm the situation, while others feared that admitting fault would tarnish the show's reputation as a neutral platform. Jenna privately expressed frustration, feeling as though she had been painted as the villain in a story that had spun far beyond her control. Still, the network executives were keenly aware that public sentiment was leaning heavily in Teyana's favor. The challenge was balancing the need to protect the show's image with the reality that dismissing Teyana's concerns entirely would likely backfire. In the end, they released a carefully worded statement acknowledging that the discussion had become spirited and expressing admiration for Teyana's talent, without directly apologizing. But the statement did little to slow the firestorm. As the days unfolded, the incident evolved from a morning show spat into a cultural conversation about how black women in entertainment are often treated when they express frustration or speak their minds. Media outlets began publishing op-eds analyzing the clash, highlighting how Teyana's reaction mirrored broader struggles for respect and recognition. Think pieces emerged about tone policing, professionalism, and the double standards that dictate who gets labeled as difficult. Teyana became a symbol of resistance in these conversations, praised for prioritizing her self-worth over appeasing television decorum. For some, her walk-off was a reminder that authenticity comes at a cost, but it also sparks necessary discussions. The narrative quickly shifted from focusing on the walk-off itself to exploring why such moments resonate so deeply in the first place, proving that Teyana's defiance had ripple effects far beyond one studio set. Teyana's fans began rallying in greater numbers, organizing online discussions under hashtags like #RespectTeyana and #StandWithTeyana. They shared clips from her past interviews and performances, drawing attention to how long she had been speaking about industry inequities without receiving due acknowledgement. Old videos resurfaced of her choreographing for major stars and contributing creative input to projects where her name was buried in the credits. For many supporters, the Today Show clash symbolized years of quiet dismissals finally boiling over. The walk-off was not seen as an impulsive outburst but as the culmination of battles she had fought behind the scenes. Her decision to leave the set became a rallying cry for artists who often felt invisible despite their hard work, sparking a wider conversation about ownership, credit, and respect in the creative industries. Meanwhile, critics of Teyana argued that she had overreacted, framing her walk-off as unprofessional and unnecessary. Morning shows, they said, were meant to be light-hearted and accessible to a broad audience, not arenas for heated debates. Some television analysts even suggested that her decision could hurt future media bookings, as producers might view her as a volatile guest. Yet these criticisms were countered by a flood of support from fellow celebrities, many of whom posted messages applauding Teyana's courage. Notable artists, actors, and influencers defended her, noting that speaking one's truth in uncomfortable spaces should never be penalized. This public backing created a domino effect, shifting the conversation in her favor and raising questions about whether the criticism stemmed more from discomfort with her candor than from genuine concerns about professionalism. As the week continued, entertainment reporters tracked every update with breathless detail. Paparazzi captured Teyana arriving at events, asking her whether she regretted walking off. She consistently gave calm but firm answers, no regrets, only clarity. She reiterated that she would never allow her narrative to be twisted, especially when it involved issues of respect and fairness. At the same time, producers from competing talk shows reportedly reached out, eager to book her and capitalize on the heightened attention. The irony wasn't lost on observers, so while some feared the incident might limit her opportunities, it instead made her one of the most sought-after guests. Teyana's stance, though controversial, had strengthened her brand as someone unafraid to stand alone. Her visibility skyrocketed, proving once again that authenticity, though risky, often resonates more powerfully than safe conformity. Behind the curtain at Today with Jenna Friends, tensions lingered. Staff members privately admitted that the line of questioning had been mishandled, though few were willing to say so publicly. Jenna herself gave a brief interview where she expressed sadness about how the segment unfolded, insisting that she had no ill intentions and deeply respected Teyana's artistry. However, the damage was done. Viewers had already made up their minds, and many believed the hosts failed to listen with empathy. For a show built on relatability and warmth, the incident felt like a crack in the carefully curated image. Producers debated whether to adjust their approach to celebrity interviews, recognizing that audiences no longer tolerated dismissive or tone-deaf exchanges. The fallout became a case study in how quickly live television can turn into a cultural flashpoint in the digital era. The clash also sparked debate among media scholars and cultural critics who analyzed the dynamics at play. They noted how Teyana's words about being labeled harsh or bitter echoed a long history of stereotypes placed on outspoken black women. Academic discussions highlighted how these narratives often undermine valid critiques by reframing them as emotional outbursts. In this context, her decision to walk off wasn't just about personal boundary, as it became a symbolic rejection of the system that constantly asks marginalized voices to remain palatable. These critiques gained traction in podcasts, blogs, and panels, solidifying the incident as more than gossip fodder. It became a moment woven into broader conversations about race, gender, and power in media. By unintentionally creating this spotlight, the Today clash underscored the tension between television's pursuit of entertainment and the real human experiences of its guests. Meanwhile, fans dissected every frame of the broadcast, creating viral edits that amplified the tension. Some slowed down clips to show Teyana's shifting expressions, noting the exact moment when her patience snapped. Others created side-by-side comparisons of Jenna's body language, interpreting her smiles and hesitations as defensive maneuvers. The internet turned the walk-off into a digital spectacle, where every glance and pause became symbolic. Memes flourished, with captions like "When you refuse to be silenced" plastered over screenshots of Teyana standing from her chair. The cultural imagination spun the incident into countless interpretations, from comedic exaggerations to serious critiques. This flood of content ensured the story never lost momentum, keeping it alive on timelines long after the actual broadcast had ended. For Teyana, the moment had grown far beyond her initial frustration, evolving into a viral legacy she hadn't planned. In private conversations, industry insiders admitted that Teyana's move had struck a nerve because it challenged the unwritten rule of playing along with television's glossy fatal Section 8. Celebrities were expected to laugh off uncomfortable questions, smile through dismissals, and never disrupt the show's rhythm. Teyana broke that script. By walking away, she reminded both fans and peers that entertainers have agency even in spaces designed to control their image. This act of defiance carried risks, but it also redefined boundaries for what guests could demand from interviews. Younger artists, watching closely, shared on social media that they felt inspired to be firmer about protecting their dignity. Industry gatekeepers may not have welcomed the precedent, but for a new generation, Teyana's stance was liberating. It planted the idea that authenticity mattered more than appeasing networks. Public opinion polls taken by entertainment blogs revealed that a majority of readers sided with Teyana, viewing her as justified in walking away. Interestingly, demographics showed that younger viewers were overwhelmingly supportive, while older audiences were more divided. Analysts suggested this reflected broader generational shifts in attitudes toward media consumption. Younger viewers valued transparency and raw authenticity, often distrusting overly polished presentations. To them, Teyana's decision symbolized empowerment. Older viewers, more accustomed to traditional television etiquette, were more likely to perceive the moment as a breakdown in professionalism. This generational divide added another layer to the story, illustrating how cultural expectations evolve and why incidents like this carry different meanings depending on perspective. The Today clash had transcended entertainment gossip to become a mirror reflecting shifts in society itself. As the frenzy began to settle into the news cycle, attention turned toward how Teyana would capitalize on the moment. Her management team strategized carefully, balancing the momentum without allowing the controversy to overshadow her artistry. She announced new music collaborations, teased upcoming film projects, and hinted at expanding her creative empire into directing. Every announcement was amplified by the increased spotlight, ensuring maximum visibility. Far from being derailed, her career trajectory appeared reinvigorated. Industry commentators noted that what could have been a setback had transformed into a resurgence, largely because Teyana owned the narrative instead of allowing others to control it. Her refusal to back down had cemented her as not just an artist, but a cultural figurehead willing to challenge norms. This rebranding, intentional or not, positioned her for an even stronger chapter ahead. Meanwhile, the Today Show attempted damage control by inviting other high-profile guests to smooth over their reputation. They booked motivational speakers, artists, and activists to discuss resilience and the importance of difficult conversations. Though these segments were well received, they could not erase the shadow of Teyana's walk-off, which continued to resurface in public discussions. Some viewers even began jokingly referring to the program as Yesterday's Show, mocking it for being out of touch. The incident revealed how quickly a brand could suffer when perceived as dismissive, even unintentionally. For producers, the lesson was clear: authenticity could no longer be treated as optional. Audiences demanded it, and ignoring that demand risked permanent credibility loss. The attempt to move on highlighted the struggle of balancing entertainment with accountability in a hyper-connected era where every moment is scrutinized. For Teyana, the experience also brought personal reflection. In candid conversations shared online, she admitted that walking off was emotionally draining but necessary. She spoke about the importance of protecting her peace, especially as a mother and role model. Her vulnerability resonated with fans who appreciated seeing both her strength and humanity. This duality of being fierce enough to stand up for herself yet open enough to share the Tola deepened her bond with supporters. Many said they felt inspired not only by her actions but also by her honesty about the aftermath. Her story became less about the singular confrontation and more about the universal struggle of choosing self-respect over compromise. By framing her walk-off as part of her larger journey, she transformed it into a lesson that transcended entertainment, touching anyone who had ever felt silenced. The media cycle continued feeding on the incident for weeks, but gradually the noise softened into reflection. Long-form podcasts dissected the clash from every angle, from journalism ethics to celebrity agency. Documentarians even floated the idea of including it in upcoming projects about modern media controversies. What was initially dismissed as a heated moment had become a touchstone for conversations about power dynamics. Teyana's decision to walk away was replayed, analyzed, and reinterpreted countless times, each retelling lawyering new meaning onto the event. While skeptics still insisted it was a stunt, the majority agreed that its authenticity was undeniable. It revealed truths about the pressures of live television, the expectations placed on women of color, and the limits of tolerance in a curated media space. What lingered most, however, was the image of Teyana leaving with her head held high. In the months that followed, Teyana leveraged the momentum into new artistic ventures. She directed visually stunning music videos, produced stage performances that drew critical acclaim, and continued expanding her brand into fashion. Each project was promoted with a renewed sense of purpose, as if fueled by the clarity the walk-off had provided. Fans proudly cited her Today Show moment whenever celebrating her wins, using it as a shorthand for her refusal to compromise. The incident became woven into her narrative as both a challenge and a turning point. Even when interviewers asked her about it later, she handled the questions gracefully, reiterating that it wasn't about drama but about self-respect. Her ability to transform conflict into empowerment cemented her reputation not just as an entertainer, but as a leader shaping cultural conversations. Eventually, the Today Show incident became a chapter in the larger story of Teyana Taylor's career, remembered less as a clash and more as a defining stand. For many fans, it marked the moment she fully stepped into her power. For critics, it remained a reminder of how quickly public sentiment can shift when a celebrity challenges the norms of mainstream media. Regardless of perspective, the walk-off had left an indelible mark. It reshaped how audiences viewed both Teyana and the morning show, leaving lessons about listening, respect, and authenticity. In hindsight, it was clear that the confrontation had been less about anger and more about boundaries. By asserting hers so boldly, Teyana had shifted the narrative around celebrity interviews and sparked necessary conversations that extended well beyond that morning's broadcast. Looking back, the storming off wasn't just an isolated act of defiance, it became a cultural milestone. Teyana Taylor reminded the world that even in carefully controlled spaces, authenticity can break through and force a reckoning. Her decision to leave, rather than conform, carried echoes of countless others who had refused to stay silent in the face of dismissal. The legacy of that morning wasn't about conflict but about courage. It illustrated that standing up for oneself sometimes means walking away, even when cameras are rolling and millions are watching. For Teyana, it was an act of liberation. For viewers, it was a lesson in self-respect. And for the media, it was a warning that glossing over real issues is no longer acceptable. In 30 minutes of live television, Teyana had changed the conversation, ensuring her truth would not only be heard but remembered.